when the invasion of Ukraine started, you and I had a conversation pretty much about all of what was going on and how terrible this was going to be, not only for Ukraine but potentially for the world, and what it kind of meant. And this has been something that's been on top of mind for me for a long time with this invasion. You had also sent me some information, some documentation, some literature from basically Russia, some propaganda that they had been pushing in their country. I read through that information. We had discussed that as well. And then in recent times, one of the things that's really caught my attention, obviously, is how much that I see anyway, a lot of kind of propaganda in America that is kind of anti-Ukraine to an extent, especially coming from a lot of right-wing outlets in this country. And it's kind of infiltrated to the point in which I'm hearing it from acquaintances, friends, and even family, kind of in the context of, well, we shouldn't be supporting this, we shouldn't be supporting Ukraine. And I think a lot of this propaganda is kind of unfortunate and creating opinions that are very misguided. So really that's kind of what prompted me to reach out to you to kind of talk about this a bit, get your perspectives on it. I just wanted to also kind of start with maybe you giving a little bit of your background.
Very well. As probably it's easy to guess, uh, my original language is Russian. I left Russia a while ago. It's about 35 years. It was not, even not Russia yet. It was Soviet Union. And I left Soviet Union 35 years ago. And I live in Russia, Soviet Union actually, 28 years. I left Soviet Union when I was 28 years old. So my first 18 years I lived in Turkmenistan, one of the countries today people compare to North Korea and found Turkmenistan today is has less freedom than North Korea even. So my first 18 years I lived in Turkmenistan. Then I did my master degrees in Moscow State University, and then I learned my PhD in biophysics. Just before revolution, it was kind of, I have feeling it's going to happen. And nobody knows how revolution in Russia can turn. So me and my wife left to Israel, lived 10 years in Israel, 15 years in Canada, and about 10 years already in the United States. Altogether, I live outside of Russia 35 years. As somebody who lives 35 years out of Russia, I'm definitely somehow disconnected. But I still understand people. I still have friends from my school, university, even from PhD. I still trying to speak with them, and I have difficulty because they really believe the Putin, and they really brainwashed. Except few people who already left Russia after February 21st, 2022. Have few people who left. Other people just believe. I don't know really because I still speaking by telephone sometimes with these people, but or sometimes we exchange messages in Telegram. But when I getting these messages, it's like we speak different languages. We speak different languages, and when I try to explain them something, I even try to share pictures of Mariupol. I also found very good video, somebody using something like a small drone, don't know if commercial one or not, and to how Mariupol looked like. And I spoke with them about India TV make a movie about my small motherland. Actually, all my grandparents come from this place. It's called Malin, which is 100 kilometers from Kiev. And they live in this small place. And what happens when first attack come from Russia, they pass through Malin and they just absolutely rubbish it. It's turned to rubbish. One of my not friend, somebody I knew while ago sent picture of house and it's completely torn rubbish. It's house of my grandparents. What am I? When I show it, they have they say me it's fake. It's fake. It's not real. It's staging. Russian not killing Ukrainian people. Russian like Ukrainian people. And what you're showing is staging. You probably took this picture from CNN or other news agency. I cannot prove them anything.
And I can relate, right, in similar fashion with people that I speak with, because the same type of thing, right? They're listening to a lot of these talking points, maybe in a different perspective, obviously, from what the people of Russia are hearing and seeing. But in the US, the same type of thing. And I'm having these conversations with people and having a lot of difficulty around that. And for me, it's a lot of frustration. I think I have a different perspective as well. Yes, I'm born in the United States. I was born in Michigan. My father, he was European. He grew up in Austria. His father was from the Czech Republic. His mother was Austrian. He grew up during, obviously, the war and saw a lot of just terrible things from his childhood, death and destruction. I just remember as a child growing up with my father, his childhood was kind of, for lack of a better term, off limits, really. Didn't speak much about it. Most of what I know is something that I was told from my mother. And my father migrated to the US after migrating to Canada. He first came to Canada in Nova Scotia, lived there for 7 years, and then that was in 1956, and then 7 years later migrated into the US. But I've always had a little bit, I think, of a different perspective. He always had that different kind of mentality, especially related to a lot of these aggressions. From my experience, it's been also kind of, it's very difficult to talk with people who are so stuck in a position with a lot of this propaganda.
You know, and what is interesting, people when I speak have great education. I count them as smart people, but you know, it's not like propaganda can actually brainwash everybody.
Yeah, and I think that's a problem, a definite problem, right? There's obviously America has its own propaganda machine. We're obviously not immune to that, and I don't think anybody's necessarily immune to disinformation or propaganda, unfortunately. That's I think another difficulty, right? People don't spend the time to educate themselves. They listen to whatever news outlet or media that they subscribe to from a political perspective, perhaps. They live within that bubble, and that's the only information that they're fed. It kind of aligns with them, and so they continue to just basically consume that day in and day out. And there's no question, there's no questioning of it. And I think that's where the big problem for me comes in. I'm always kind of taking a different approach. I try to question everything because I don't know what we're being told, right? Is it correct? Is it wrong? And even going back to when we were the aggressor in Iraq, this was one of those moments that I think, from how my father reacted to that and how I as well kind of followed suit with that. He was very against our actions in Iraq. He was very vocal against that, and then I was also very vocal against that. And my surroundings, most of the people that I either worked with or spoke with, and I was in at that point in Florida, very much it's a kind of a right wing state. There was not a single person that I knew on the right that didn't believe the message that they were getting from the Bush administration, for example. Everybody was all in on let's just go ahead and go into Iraq. And then unfortunately, even on the left, this is where I have a problem with a lot of the left-wing politicians. Joe Biden, he voted for it. Hillary Clinton, she voted for it. The only person that really stood the test of time on that was Bernie Sanders, who we've been fed propaganda in this country as well, and people fell for it. And what I also find now is that people have changed their tune on that, and they almost act as if they didn't have that opinion at that point in time, when that was clearly not the case. Now that we know factually that we were lied to, information was cherry-picked. And what was frustrating for me back then was that even then I educated myself and understood that France, Germany, other countries, their intelligence agencies were saying, no, there's no weapons here. The UN was saying, no, there's no weapons here. The only administration that was saying that we had weapons there was the Bush administration.
It was no question about if Iraq have weapons or Iraq don't have weapons. It's laughable because it's absolutely out of context. Question was who actually the September 11 act. It's not government, really. It was a group of people. Now, as I understand, it was pretty well-known group of people, and it was Al Qaeda, and it was Saudi family, like very close person to Saudi Arabia, and Bush administration, Bush family relationship, and instead of actually act towards Saudis, they attack Afghanistan. It's just hilarious. Hilarious speaking about it. It's nonsense because the United States was attacked by Saudis, not Iraq. Why? My explanation is very simple. The only reason because they're not able to attack the Saudis because Saudis is close friends. Now, because Saudis close friends and the United States not able to attack Saudis, so Saudi Arabia, so they attack somebody who they know they meet, they kind of can create a case of gaslight in the United States about success. It's attack on Iraq was absolutely unrelated to what happened. The building was attacked by people well known. These people actually make courses in United States. CIA and FBI have information. They taking courses and they member of terroristic organization. So it was political decision. It's not like military decision. It's even hilarious discussing.
Again, it really, for me, comes back to that propaganda. And now what I'm hearing on the aggression of Russia into Ukraine and the war that they have started is a lot of propaganda. And again, what I'm seeing is that a lot of Americans, at least from my perspective, are falling for some of this propaganda. And that's kind of the warning for me that I want to present is that people need to pay attention to what's actually happening, right? For example, I'm hearing a lot of different things about Zelensky, for example. Zelensky's trying to basically kill all Russian-speaking people or remove all Russian-speaking people from his country. Meanwhile, Zelensky is a Russian-speaking person, and he generally has spoken Russian in public many times, right? This is I don't know where this kind of propaganda is coming from. It seems.
Listen, it's complete nonsense. Like I've been in Kiev and then been in Ukraine about 50 times because it's my small motherland. My family, my whole kin and kids also live in Ukraine. Lived in Ukraine. actually. But all my family lived in Ukraine, and I feel I always feel Ukraine as a home, and I know Kiev very well. I know all around of Kiev very well, and travel a lot around the Kiev. First of all, everybody, like literally, speak Russians. Like 100%. I can speak Russians and speak Russian. Some people speak Russian much better than people from Moscow or St. Petersburg. The second thing, I don't know even one person in Ukraine which able to believe like couple of months before war started it's possible because first of all it's the same religion. Most of them Orthodox Christians. Some part of close to Poland is Catholics, but most of them exactly the same religion. Everybody knows history of Russia, which started in 900, and this not 1900, 900, when Kiev was capital of Russia. Yes, it was capital of Russia. Then in Kiev, Russians became Christians. It was Knyaz Duke Vladimir, which is actually turned Russians to Christians. But problem is after Mongolian invasion, you need to understand, before Ukraine, it was Khazar kingdom on the same territory. And I remember my father have kind of special action in Russia. It's not like it was public, but on territory of Kiev was Khazar kingdom and was city before Kiev. And this city, they was Jewish. And a lot of archaeological artifacts point to Jewish, because Khazar kingdom was Jewish kingdom. They turned to Jewish like I don't know in the third, fourth century, and they lived there. It was not ethnically Jewish, but their religion was Jewish. Then events caused Khazars move out of Kiev, they moved to east and suddenly disappeared. But it was a good place. It was a good place to live. So people from different places come to Kiev, and it was mostly Slavonic. Then Norwegian Vikings captured this territory and became actually dukes of Kiev, Knyaz. In Russian is Knyaz. They became dukes of Kiev. All upper level of Kiev, Russia, it was actually member of Norwegian Vikings, family Rurik. And they come from Rus tribe. Why it's Russia? It's Rus tribe. Dukes from family of Ruriks. They capture this place. And that's how Vladimir actually was half Viking ancestry, half Jewish ancestry. Not Jewish from Israel, it's Jewish from Khazar ancestry. Bottom line, yes, it's how Russia started. And yes, it was Russian kingdom. Why I explain is not single entity in any nations which pointed to belonging to one ethnicity or other. Russian is kind of combination of multiple ethnicities. It's Khazar ethnicity there, it's Viking ethnicity there, Slavonic tribes there. It was Russia, Kiev, Russia, before Mongols come and capture it. Not like saying it's the same people. Most Russians have the Tatar ancestry as well. It's like no Russian without Mongol ancestry. And if somebody going to say I am ethnical Russian, it's wrong. It's not ethnical Russian. It's all kind of combination of all kind of nations which is a living territory Russia. Then Moscovia, and Moscovia, some really family, dukes moved. And then Moscow started grow, and Dmitry was Duke of Moscow, who actually free Russia from Mongols. But and then they captured Kiev. Kiev was captured from Russia by Poland and so forth. Poland who owned Kiev. Poland actually captured Moscow, and it was Poland Duke in Moscow as well, for few years. Bottom line, when they trying to prove historical rights to Kiev, it's complete nonsense. In the same way, Poland can actually claim Moscow, which is also nonsense.
Yeah, and I think we had spoken about this before, right? You and I, you were talking about point in time. You had mentioned, basically said, like, point in time is, today, instead of trying to point to a very specific point in time and say, well, we need to be exactly what we were at this point in time, which to an extent,
Now I'm here.
right?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
And Putin today is basically trying to recreate the Soviet Union, to an extent.
Actually, he's trying to recreate great Russia. You don't understand, right? Not Soviet Union, great Russia, because in greatness of Russia, Russia owned Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Litva, Poland, all of it was belonged to Russia one day. But again, for how long and how it was captured, what circumstances.
Well, and to that point, since 1991, Ukraine has had its sovereignty. It's, after the fall of Soviet Union, that Ukraine has been its own nation. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. And it was a kind of agreement between Russia and Ukraine, and yes, and it was actually approved by UN and international society, which is agree Ukraine is a separate country.
In fact, I think I've got some documentation here that I had pulled up on that, but it was basically talking about the agreements that you mentioned with Russia, where Ukraine
Yes.
and Russia had agreements. At this point in time, Russia is in violation of those agreements with their invasion of Ukraine. Not only that, many other international agreements. And I think I think we can kind of look at this, and at least my perspective is that the narrative that we shouldn't support Ukraine, are you maybe pro-imperialism, right? Because now that's what really I see Russia is doing. They're expanding their territory.
Sorry, what I think, it's not necessarily imperialism. Problem is 1945 we established something very important. We created rules. These rules were very simple. We created a United Nation. I don't speak about you, me. I speak about people.
Yeah.
And establish some kind of status quo. Why we establish this status quo? It's in history and in philosophy, there is a very big problem. The right of strongest. What means right of strongest? If you're stronger than me, you can come to me and take my life, my wife, my children, my belongings, because you're strong. You have rights. Well, this rule system is not invented by humans today. It's the whole history of our countries just started. It was villages, and then it was countries, and then it was rulers. It's actually agreement between people. So it's always agreement. So I pay you, but you protect me. This similar agreement was established in 1945. Listen, we are human. Our relationships based on rules, and these rules is our agreement. We protect countries which have no power to protect themselves. We protect countries from strongest countries to take belongings, to take people, to take land, to just take over of them. This is a rules we created for ourselves. If we don't going to protect Ukraine, it's not even about imperialism. It's much deeper. We don't protect. We're not going to protect weakest. We will allow our rules, our establishments, to be broken, and right of strongest will be what is going to rule humankind from here and now. Today, United States strongest country in the world. Yes, all big countries have childhood, have adulthood, and became old. Who knows what's going to happen to old United States? Right now, India and China, it's countries which is getting to adult, becoming stronger. One day, they going to be more strong countries in the world. I saw one day statistics. Number of A plus students in India, A plus students, so I speak about school, more than all students in United States. Just imagine this number. Number of A plus students, school students in India, more than all students in the United States. It's huge potential. People, it's huge potential. These countries, not now, but eventually they definitely going to be uh, more strongest and more powerful countries in the world. Just because they have more people, they have more choice with these smart people, and these smart people will go work to these countries, and countries will become more industrial, more advanced, more science. Just amount of scientists will be also bigger. Amount of money they have will be bigger. Early or late. It's not question it's going to be. The question is only when. And suddenly you get to understand United States still the most powerful country in the world. It's just question of numbers. It's just mathematics. You don't want somebody who is stronger than you, land, took resources, took smartest people from you, just because they're able to do it, because they're strongest. Forget about imperialism, because
But it also, like, textbook kind of is, they're expanding, they want to expand their territory. They've annexed Crimea, they're trying to take over Ukraine. So I think there's.
and on the right here, just because they can. A lot of people in the army, enough tanks, enough rockets, and enough planes, enough bombs to do. They exercise a right of strongest, which is I cannot agree. In circumstances, doesn't matter for me. Is imperialism, communism, socialism, capitalism, or anything. It's kind of root cause of all problem of human beings. We cannot allow right of strongest.
Absolutely agree. And I think that's what problem is, right? There are a lot of pundits, there are a lot of people making talking points in this country, and it is unfortunate that it's penetrating into a lot of minds of people in this country that we should we should not do anything. We should stop supporting.
Listen, listen here. Listen, man, here is huge problem. Most of our politicians, chess player can count 7 steps ahead. Somebody like Kasparov, Karpov, kind of genius of chess, can count 8, 9. But not our politicians can count only 2 at best. But you listen, Biden or Trump even worse. In best, he count one step ahead. And when we arrive in these situations, he start count next one step ahead. And it's hilarious. Bottom line, this propaganda can exist. Nobody can anything above 1 or 2 steps ahead.
And that's absolutely true. People aren't thinking critically. They're not questioning the information that they're getting. They're not thinking about, maybe this is just painted a certain way, or maybe this information has been cherry picked to, paint a specific narrative, right?
Listen, again, let me interrupt. Your information you're consuming, information going to you, it's always sharing.
Right. You're going to have your own experiences, your own perceptions, your own ideas of how things can work. You should be able to come to some type of conclusion on your own. But I also do think that it's a problem when it's very obvious that the information is incorrect. So, if you don't mind, maybe what we can do is listen to a couple of these clips. So I've got a couple of things that I had taken, and maybe we can just discuss through some of them and see what our thoughts are on them. Well, there's a local Atlanta radio host that I was given a podcast to, and I listened to roughly 2 hours of this podcast, and there was quite a bit of what I thought was concerning information in it. And then I thought there was other information in that podcast that I agreed with, right? So I don't necessarily disagree with everything this person said, but a lot of the context I felt was very misguided. And again, like that kind of cherry picking situation, it felt like he painted a certain narrative with some of this information that could mislead people, very easily if they don't spend the time to understand a little bit deeper. So let's take a look.
Have been publishing stories about how the Azov battalion is Nazi since like 2007.
Yeah.
And now they act like they never did that. They can't wash it off the table the way in 1984, but they just ignore it.
Mm-hmm.
And they act like, oh, anybody who says there are Nazis in the Azov battalion, that's a Putin stooge. That's somebody who's got Putin's talking points. But you're not going to do it. Most people aren't going to do it. But all you have to do is go look for all these articles from the New York Times, all of these things that identified that. But it's not conducive to what we need from the people right now, because we're asking them at a time of horrible economy to take their fucking money and send it to, and yes, you are funding some Nazis in Ukraine. That's not a conspiracy theory. If it's a conspiracy theory, did it start with the articles in the New York Times in 2012?
Right, yeah.
But they know most people won't go look.
So I played that clip because I thought that was a little bit of an interesting clip. And one of the conversations I had with somebody was basically that we shouldn't be supporting Ukraine in this way because then we're supporting Nazis. We shouldn't be sending them our money. I completely disagree. Now, I can't speak so much to this specific battalion or military group within Ukraine. I don't know their history, but it could be that at some point in time. But what I think is dishonest, at least to me, is that what I see is that people are using this type of information to basically say, well, we can't support Ukraine. We need to stop giving them funding, right? And again, Ukraine was invaded by Russia. So this is a very, kind of, to me, troubling piece of media that is being pushed a lot right now by many on the right. Matt Gaetz also presenting some of the same information, right? So, I mean, let's maybe break that down. What are your thoughts, Stan?
First of all, I do know history of Azov battalion, and what I can say, yes, it started as Nazis. Yes, this battalion started as Nazis, and yes, it's went a long way from Nazis to actually National Guards. Only idiot can say no, Azov battalion was not Nazis. Yes, it was, but it need to happen. 2014 aggression. It need to happen a lot of things to move Azov battalion from nationalistic movement to national guard movement.
Well, that goes back to that point in time, right? Looking at something from a point in time in the past and not looking at here and now. 2014, we're in 2023. And there's been, as you mentioned, and I did read the same type of thing about the Azov battalion, that there were these types of problems, and that's a very far and distant thing from what they are today.
It is patriots. People who is in Azov battalion went very long path and was learned and educated, and they not Nazis. They're not Nazis.
And what's also interesting, some of the things that I've heard that I think is also a part of this propaganda. You mentioned NATO a moment ago, right? And I've been hearing constantly that it's really NATO and America's fault because we might let Ukraine join NATO, so Russia feels that they are being invaded upon by us encroaching and bringing NATO closer to their border. Which the irony in that is that when Russia invaded Ukraine and is trying to take over Ukraine, they would actually be expanding Russia to the border of NATO. So it's a total nonsense argument. But again, this is another part of the propaganda that is being pushed that people are falling for. And Ukraine has been entertaining the idea for a long time of joining NATO. It's their choice. It's their free ability for them as a nation to decide for themselves if they want to become a part of NATO. There should be no problem with this. Russia should have no say or problem with that. I don't see that as being something where the US and NATO is causing this problem, but that's another piece of the propaganda that's being pushed.
They actually think they have right to do so. To say Ukraine, what they can do, what they cannot. The same thing they invade to Georgia, and the same claim Russia did to Georgia, because they say Georgia is not country. Georgia belonged to Russia before revolution, and now it's our zone of influence. We would like to command them because we have rights. But what rights we have? Except if I don't know. You know.
Except for having the power to do it. And if nobody stands up against that, right? See, and that's the problem again.
It's right or strong. It's
correct. And that's the problem. So the question is, where does it end? So this happened in Georgia, this happens in Crimea, this is happening now in Ukraine. And I've also heard the argument, well, no, you just, let them take at least the Dunbar region or something like that, and Russia will stop and everything will be okay, which is absolutely crazy. Ludicrous idea.
What is facts? Why you can draw this conclusion? Because whatever Putin saying, it's completely opposite. He never said it's my ambition to capture Ukraine. My ambition is at least what he's saying on multiple forums. It's great Russian. He trying to not put details on his ambition. But yes, his ambition is great Russian.
His ambition is obviously to continue. And see, I think that's the problem. If nobody stands up to that, it will continue.
In way to Estonia, small country like 1.5 million people, but it's member of NATO, and definitely Russia able to swallow Estonia in a couple of days. There's no army there. Those are not going to protect Estonia. Yes, we have 10,000 NATO army inside of Estonia, but it's really small country, small territory. I'm not sure NATO going to protect Estonia. Absolutely not sure. Maybe after Ukraine, yes, but if before Ukraine, Russia tried to capture Estonia, everybody will try to find way how to make it to not start any war with Russia. I'm pretty sure. Again, it's my opinion, and I have no facts to be sure, but I remember one day Trump questioned the need NATO. We all here in Europe, friends, and we have nothing to afraid. Why we need NATO? And here you are. If one day when NATO not exist, Russia trying to capture Estonia, it can happen.
And the thing that I worried about, right, is that because he was proposing these ideas in his administration of, dismantling, pulling out of NATO, that type of thing. I don't know if he would try that, if he would get a second term, if that, heaven forbid, would be the case. But even John Bolton, his one of his secretaries of defense, the Secretary of Defense, has come out very much against him for his positions on NATO. Right, very, very dangerous rhetoric coming from Trump.
No problem is, you know, he have some good ideas, like ask data members to start paying.
Sure.
Yeah,
I don't have a problem with that, right? But the opposite of that, to say that we're just going to leave NATO and then have the possibility of that breaking apart, this is dangerous.
Well, so what I'm trying to say, problem is, you remember just a few minutes ago when the speakers said Trump was able to think one step ahead. It's not good shot. This idea, let's not it's exactly example of thinking only one step ahead.
If that, you give him a lot of credit, unfortunately.
No, this example when persons thinking one step ahead, nothing else. It's not necessary for politician.
I want to play another interesting clip real quick here, and I want to put this up on the screen.
So we're going to, says Lindsey Graham confidently, continue pouring billions into Ukraine until they, quote, take Putin out. Does Putin know this? Well, we have no idea. We're not allowed to see Russian media in this country. That's too much information for Americans to handle. But if Putin does know that we plan to kill him, wouldn't he fight back with nuclear weapons? Why wouldn't he fight back with nuclear weapons? No one in the United States seems to be allowed to wonder that, much less have a conversation about it out loud. Instead, we're treated to more lectures about democracy. Ukraine is a democracy, we're told. That's why we're on the side of Ukraine. The problem is that is a lie. Ukraine is not a democracy. Ukraine is a corrupt one-party state. Ukraine has none of the freedoms that define democratic governance: freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion. Ukraine is the least free place in all of Europe, and probably for that reason, it is Joe Biden's favorite place.
So this clip is so unbelievably false. And this is
every single statement. You can subscribe to anything from the Telegram. I can show you on Telegram channels different Russian TV stations, and you have everything what you would like to know. You was saying Russians and how saying Russians. And next, Putin definitely know what Lindsey Graham said. It's not like don't know, because I know for sure it was shown. Lindsey Graham was shown on first channel on Solovyov show. There was very popular pro-Putin polit commentator in Russia named Solovyov, and Lindsey Graham statement was shown on this show. And it's actually definitely was delivered to. So it's not like a lie. It's every single statement in this conversation. It's just lie.
And this was a basically a primetime show from Tucker Carlson, unfortunately, who is a very unfortunate person. And I'm glad that he's no longer with Fox News, but they continue the the same insanity, unfortunately, on that station. But he also said a lot of things about Ukraine and why we shouldn't support them. Again, right? Ukraine is he said, a one-party state, which is absolutely incorrect. Ukraine has what? Servant of the people, European solidarity, the fatherland, for the future. I'm just naming a few of them, right? And Zelensky in the last election won with 73%, and he has a majority, which is a very similar type of thing. So they have the People's Party took 254 out of 450 seats. Like what kind of talking point is this from this kind of insanity, right?
My feeling is we have people who getting money from Russians. I'm pretty sure Tucker Carlson taking money from Russians.
Well, it could be. I don't know.
No, again, I can this one statement I cannot prove, but to do what Tucker Carlson doing, you must have some kind of consensus. Sometimes people have consensus like to make shocking statements, and then you're getting a lot of people on YouTube or TV which is going to your conversation or programs. But even Tucker Carlson cannot be so blind. I don't believe Tucker Carlson is stupid. I know he is like money. One day person will need to look on himself in the mirror and look his own eyes. And I believe it's integrity, some level of integrity do not lie so outrageous like characters.
In closing, I just want to talk quickly about spotting fake news and propaganda. First, there is no problem with coming to your own conclusions as long as they are based in real facts. Spreading disinformation because it may agree with your politics damages your credibility. Make sure to check your biases, as this can affect your judgment. We all deserve the truth, and that appears harder to come by in the 24-hour news cycle. Consider the source. What is the source? What is their reputation? And can the data from the source be supported by evidence? Use fact-checking websites and avoid news sources that spread on social networks. While fact-checking itself can have its inherent problems, taking an additional step to educate yourself before forwarding that message could help avoid the spread of disinformation.